I've been collecting black pieces of paper lately. This is a holiday 2004 brochure, little holiday gift guide, I guess, for Nintendo products. Basically, what they had going on in 2004. As you can see, the Nintendo DS is a major focus at the moment. Which I don't know. I always know the DS came out in 2004, but it never really felt like that, you know, because it kind of felt like this is a product of like 2005, 2006 or so, you know. It felt like the DS had a couple years until it really became like the DS we all remember, mainly because like so much of the DS marketing feels just so in line with what the Wii was, and the Wii came out in 2006. And around that time, I feel like both kind of merged into one. In 2004, if you look back at the DS marketing and what they were positioning the DS as, well, they definitely were going for, you know, more of a casual market. They were really pushing this thing as more of a, you know, a core system, something for, you know, people who played video games. Just the fact that, like, two of the first games that they showed off with the system were Mario 64 DS, or Mario 64 by 4, as it was called at the time, and Metroid Prime Hunters. Like, okay, well, Grandma's excited. But, of course, they also had the GameCube and Game Boy Advance at the time. The three pillars, even though the DS played Game Boy Advance games. Nintendo usually always says that when they announce a new system, is that, oh, this isn't a replacement for the old one. These are going to live in harmony. Then, you know, and they specifically wanted to make sure we knew that with the Game Boy Advance and DS. So why did you put a Game Boy Advance slot on there? It was obviously because they were a bit worried about the DS, I feel. The Game Boy Advance was doing incredibly well, so it didn't really make a ton of sense that the Game Boy Advance would be the first one to get a successor rather than, you know, the GameCube, which needed a successor much more because it wasn't doing that well. Like, why wouldn't you just keep the good times rolling with the Game Boy Advance? No, you release a brand new system. No, this was supposed to be something that was, you know, released that was supposed to live alongside the Game Boy Advance. So why did it have a Game Boy Advance slot? Because it was supposed to replace it. Go on the inside. Look at that. You see, this is the kind of advertisement I'm talking about. Like, you don't really remember this era of the DS's marketing. You know, this feels this is trying to be futuristic and advanced. You know, the DS marketing I recall, you know, well, I mean, I mainly remember, when I think DS marketing, I think white and just simple and just intuitive and Beyonce playing Rhythm Heaven. That's what I think. This is much more trying to, the right touch in handheld gaming. That is a, I've never heard that tagline before. It's an interesting tagline. I don't know if it works that well. Yeah, Nintendo DS, draw, sketch, write, and send wireless messages with the built-in communication tool PictoChat. Play impressive new 3D rendered Nintendo DS games and play all your favorite Game Boy Advance games in single-player mode. What is single-player mode? Oh, does that mean, like, is it because you couldn't... Oh, okay. I thought they were referring to just playing whatever. I believe the DS, it's kind of tricky to use a link cable with that. As in, I don't think you can. Because DSs were made to, you know, be wireless. I never actually thought of it that way. Because I never played a ton of multiplayer Game Boy Advance games. So it was, I never thought of it in the sense that, like, yeah, DSs can't really play Game Boy Advance games in multiplayer because you need the Game Boy Advance link cable. Interesting. I thought they meant by single player mode the fact that I thought it was like a weird phrasing of like the way that you know how Game Boy Advance games are only on one screen and you can swap between the two if you want, but you can only play it on one screen. I don't know. Built-in wireless communication allows you to experience real-time multiplayer gameplay. Color LCD screens are wide format and backlit. Which is interesting because the DS's screens are not as wide as the Game Boy Advance's. And Backlit is an overstatement. These screens are horrible. They're not good. They barely, like, I can barely see anything on them. But that was kind of rectified with the DS Lite, so, you know, it's whatever. But this original model, I like it from a retro point of view, as in, like, look at that. That's a piece of shit. I like that. It's also weird to call the DS the retro, but it's, what, like 16 years old at this point? It's gonna be 17 years old. So it's just like, if you think about it, like, okay, what was retro in 2005? You know, 17 years from 2005 was, what, 1988? And 1987, I'm sorry. 1986, I'm sorry. 1988. And that definitely was considered retro back then, so I think it's fair to call the original DS a retro system at the time. From the perspective of, you know, looking back at it like that, I like the look of this, like, but it obviously, there was obviously some growing pains there, and it's not the most practical DS, I think. Like, the screens aren't great. I liked that it had a power button. I like when my handheld systems have power buttons. I think that's quirky. And it came with a demo of Metroid Prime Hunters, which, again, that was like, this was when they were more so trying to, they were really trying to push the DS as more of a core gaming handheld. The fact that they were really pushing online multiplayer, and the fact that it could play Game Boy Advance games. Coming this holiday season, experience a totally new way to play video games with the Nintendo DS handheld video game system. But this is what I'm really looking at. Coming soon. This is interesting. Alright, let's see. But yes, it came with a demo of Metroid Prime Hunters. That game didn't come out until like 2006, I think. It was a long wait. But here we have Super Mario 64 DS. I'm kind of torn on that version of Mario 64. I know some people consider it the definitive version. I don't really know about that. I think it's a cool alternate version of the game. I don't really know about definitive. I feel like, you know, adding multiple playable characters is cool, but my problem is it just, like, the multiple playable characters are mainly there in, like, just, and it's more of a nuisance to use them than, like, oh man, this is cool, I have to use Luigi here. It's just like they kind of separate power-ups that you would normally just have as Mario in the original Mario 64, but they force you to use the other characters instead. So it's like in the original game, like, oh man, you know, I want to use the invisibility power-up. I'll just grab the invisibility power-up. But in Mario 64 DS, oh, I want to use the invisibility power-up. Well, I guess I have to use Luigi for this, because Luigi's the only one that can do that. I kind of wish they would just be like, hey, if you want to play as Luigi, you can just play as Luigi. Who cares? You know, you can just do that. There's a lot of cool stuff in Mario 64 DS. I think it deserves, like, a fair chance at, like, being a legitimate version of Mario 64. I think if they remade this version of Mario 64 and just gave it actual analog control, that would also help out quite a bit. But that was the first way I even beat Mario 64, was Mario 64 DS. I remember specifically, it was during a long stint of snowstorms, and it was very cold in Ohio, and I spent a lot of time in the bathroom just hanging out, playing Mario 64 DS. As in, like, this would be like right before I would take a shower. I'd be like, oh, I'm just gonna, like, you know, like, start the water, get it nice and warm, and I'm just gonna hang out on the toilet. I was completely clothed, don't worry, but I would just sit on the toilet, as in, like, I would sit on it like a seat, in pants and whatnot, and just kick back and play Mario 64 DS while I had the water running. I wasted a ton of water, but it was an oddly therapeutic experience. Then we have Metroid Prime Hunters. Again, that was kind of like, that was kind of the big game for the DS. Just the fact that a Metroid Prime game was being made for a portable was a huge deal. And that's kind of like why they specifically did Mario 64 on the DS, to just show how far we've come, and the fact that you can play these 3D games on the DS. Not only these 3D games, but these genre-defining 3D games. These games that defined what 3D gaming could be. 3D and first-person gaming on a handheld. That was insane. And it's still, like, it's just like, you know, I feel like with the 3DS, I was still kind of like there, and with the Game Boy Advance, just having these games that were normally only home console games and having them on the go for the first time was a magical feeling. And unfortunately, you know, obviously the Nintendo Switch was capitalizing on that. But now that we've had the Switch for so long, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that that magic is starting to go away, and in some cases it's kind of already gone, because I expect it at this point. I'm like, yeah, the Switch is portable, okay, cool. But, you know, back in the day, and that's not to discredit any of the Switch, it's just the fact that the Switch has been around for so long, and all the games that come out on it are also portable games, so it's like, you know, like, oh man, Mario Sunshine is on the Switch. It's portable now. Whoa. You know, it's like, but you know, it's not like it was back in the day when, you know, you saw Mario 64 DS for the first time on a portable. That was insane. You have Madden, Ridge Racer. I think that game was developed by Nintendo. I think Ridge Racer on the DS was developed by Nintendo Software Technology, which is like a Nintendo of America studio, and they've done some weird stuff. And don't quote me on that. I'll look it up afterwards to make sure it's true. But I believe Nintendo Software Technology developed that game, which they've developed some weird games. They've also done like Bionic Commando and Crystalis on the Game Boy Color for whatever reason. Like, those are not Nintendo published game, or like those aren't Nintendo like franchises, and like Ridge Racer is also not that. I don't know why they did that. Maybe like Nintendo gave them a deal where like they were like, hey, can you put Ridge Racer on the DS? We'll develop it for you. Which is weird, considering that nobody talks about Ridge Racer on the DS. Nobody talks about Bionic Commando on the Game Boy Color. Nobody talks about Crystalis on the Game Boy Color. So why would Nintendo go out of their way to get those games on those platforms? You know, it's interesting. The Herbs, Sims in the City, Ping Pals, which I think I don't know much about Ping Pals, but I think it's basically THQ's version of PictoChat, which was built into every DS, so this was kind of a useless game. Tiger Woods PGA Tour, Spider-Man 2, and Asphalt Urban GT, which, you know, Asphalt, a mobile game. Asphalt's always been like a mobile version. It's kind of like those mobile games that are made by like Gameloft and whatnot, that are actually they're okay for what they are. You know, for mobile games, they're decently well put together, but they're mobile-only franchises. There's like a Call of Duty-esque knockoff that's only on mobile. It's actually pretty good for being like a mobile-only franchise, but the only reason why you'd buy it is because, like, well, this is a mobile alternative to Call of Duty. And it's kind of the same with Asphalt. Asphalt's always kind of been the mobile alternative to stuff like Need for Speed or whatnot, even though Need for Speed's been on mobile, same with Call of Duty. But, you know, those are, you know, specifically made for mobile. But Asphalt's made its way to, like, the DS and 3DS. I had Asphalt 3D on the 3DS mainly because I only had enough money for one 3DS game at GameStop when I was buying my first 3DS and 3DS games alongside it, and I only had enough for Pilotwings Resort and Asphalt 3D. And Asphalt 3D wasn't that great, but it was tolerable. But you know what else is tolerable? The GameCube. Look at that. That was actually my exact color. I had the Platinum one, which I like the Platinum one. Let's see. It was a big year for the GameCube in 2004. A lot of the defining titles were coming out, or at least in the pipeline. You know, we have Resident Evil 4. There we have Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, Paper Mario. It's mainly a lot of third-party titles on this page here. Let's see. Let's see exactly what was on the in the pipeline. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. That's probably the least discussed Metroid Prime game out of all of them. Like, I honestly hear more people bring up Metroid Prime Pinball as a joke than they talk about Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. It was a bit of a, from what I've known, because that's, I mean, like, from the Metroid Prime games that I've played the most of 1, and I've played a bit of 3, but I have not even tried to yet. And from what I've heard, it's one of the more mixed ones. They did attempt to add multiplayer in there, and I honestly don't know how that turned out. Not great, because they didn't really bring it back. I mean, they had Metroid Prime Hunters, which was multiplayer focused, and of course Metroid Prime Federation Force. Scratch that last statement. They did bring it back, but you know, this was supposed to be a big focus. This was kind of like, you know, Metroid Prime was Nintendo's first-person game on the GameCube, and this was when Halo was blowing up. So I assume Nintendo looked at this and said, "Oh, well, we should add multiplayer to Metroid Prime." So that's why Metroid Prime 2 has multiplayer in there. You know, I don't think it was bad, but it was, you know, just not for Metroid Prime in the way they put it in there. But, you know, they brought it back for Federation Force, which I know is not a bad game. It's just an unnecessary one. That's kind of the deal. Resident Evil 4. The survival horror series takes a shocking new turn. I love Resident Evil 4. It's fantastic. My only problem with it is I just felt like it went on for probably like an hour or two too long. Like if it ended like an hour or two before it did, I would have been like, oh, that is like the perfect game length. Not saying that it's bad with like the length it has. It's just like, you know, it was like, all right, you know, let's wrap things up. Then they have Pikmin 2, which is, wow, this is that's the only Pikmin game I have not beaten. It goes on for a while. It's a weird game. Pikmin 2 is still good, but it's a weird Pikmin game. They have a lot of weird stuff in that one, but it's still pretty good. I just think it goes on for a while, and it takes out a lot of, you know, my favorite Pikmin game is honestly Pikmin 1, because I like how stressful it is, because of the the time limit you have. You only have 30 days to complete your task. And Pikmin 2 is a bit more, it's hard to describe. It's a bit more like arcadey, I guess is the way to put it, where you have the you go underground, and you have to go through the caves where you don't really have a time limit, and it's just about kind of like going through them all and surviving. But I like Pikmin 1. I like how simple it is, and I like how the time limit, it really makes you think harder, and it adds more consequences to when you really screw up. And Pikmin 3 is phenomenal. I think Pikmin 3, like, overall, if you look at everything critically, is the best game. But I think Pikmin 1 is just overall, like, my favorite. Just because I like how simple it is. You know, I know like Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 3 had a lot more that make them like more like, you know, just deep games and deep experiences. But I don't know, there's something about Pikmin 1. I just like how simple it was, and just a lot of the elements of it, you know, that might have made it kind of a turnoff for some people. Honestly, make it like one of my favorites. Which makes me stupid. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. A stylish RPG places Mario in a world constructed from paper. It's interesting that they lean heavily into the paper aesthetic. I mean, Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door did lean a lot more into the paper aesthetic than the original Paper Mario. The original Paper Mario barely leaned into the paper aesthetic. It was literally just the fact that, oh, they're flat, let's call it Paper Mario. This one leans a bit more into it, as in, like, you know, you have, like, Paper Mario turning into the paper airplane and whatnot, and they have a lot more elements of it. But, you know, now it's completely, like, the paper aesthetic has taken over the series. Battles unfold before audiences whose support affects the outcome. Mario transforms into many forms, including a paper airplane. Many sidekicks, each with special powers, aid Mario's quest. Obviously a fan favorite there. I have played the most of the Paper Mario games people hate, which would be Super Paper Mario Sticker Star, Paper Mario Color Splash, and the Origami King. I have not beaten the Origami King because it was going on for a bit long. I liked it, but it was just like, it was going on for a while. I don't know. I played about 15-20 hours of it, and I just kind of felt like, alright, you know, I might come back to it later. But it just dragged in a bunch of places. You know, I thought it was very high quality, but I just felt like it dragged a lot, like in where was it? I mean, like, it was in the desert area. That's where I was just like, ooh, boy, this is taking a while, and I'm not having the greatest of times. Mario Tennis. Before Mario's Power Tennis was even thought of as a title, we just had Mario Tennis. That's a good game. I'm not the biggest Mario Tennis guy. It's probably my least favorite Mario Sport game. I like Mario Golf and Strikers and Baseball, and I do like tennis. There's not really a Mario Sport style that I dislike, but Mario Tennis is the least interesting to me. But that's a good version. That's probably the best version overall. You have a lot of stuff going on in that one. But Mario Party 6, that's the best one! You have a day and night cycle with the boards. That's like the best part about it. And you have a microphone, which is stupid, but it's just like, it makes it kind of funny. That's the best Mario Party in my opinion. I like that one. And I have Beautiful Joe 2. Beautiful Joe is incredibly difficult, but it is a very stylish and fun game. I do like it. But I have never played Beautiful Joe 2. Then we have Geist, which is Nintendo's other first-person shooter, which is one of the only other games that Nintendo published that was rated M. I mean, now they've done a lot more rated M games. They still haven't done a ton, but back then, Eternal Darkness was the first M-rated game Nintendo ever published. And after that, they did Geist. Didn't do that well. But we have GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which was done by EA, kind of playing off of the success of GoldenEye on the N64. Now, I kind of miss having a lot of James Bond games. It was cool having, like, so many first-person shooters that weren't, like, M-rated and were kind of, like, just, hey, you know, like, first-person shooters that teenagers could pick up without their mom. You know, they were just kind of, like, they were just kind of enjoyable. They were a lot more lighthearted, I think, than, like, the more serious first-person shooters, especially nowadays. You know, it was kind of nice to have more light-hearted first-person shooters. Of course, now we have a lot more, like, cartoony ones, like Overwatch and Fortnite. But, you know, for a while there, it was just kind of like gritty first-person shooters with very serious tones and, you know, a lot of, like, serious issues. And it was kind of cool to have, like, the James Bond games because they weren't that. They were ridiculous. And, you know, they were normally rated teen, which meant, you know, you could pick those up. You know, I liked GoldenEye on Wii because that meant I didn't have to have my mom there when I bought the game at GameStop. I could just buy it myself and then go home. Because I wasn't 18 yet. So, it was, you know, that was kind of like, it was basically Call of Duty, a T-rated Call of Duty. And it wasn't, and it didn't make you feel depressed while playing it. Because it was very, you know, it was lighthearted. It was a lighthearted spy action flick where you killed a bunch of people. I love that. Madden 05. Give me about 3 years on that one. Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and The Lost Ocean. So does Nintendo... I believe Nintendo owns this series now because that was developed by Monolith Soft. Because then they did Baten Kaitos Origins, which was published by Nintendo for the GameCube. But this was published by Namco. And I don't recall when Nintendo bought Monolith Soft. I think it was like at least a little after this moment. But yeah, they did that. And that and Baten Kaitos Origins. I know at least, like, I think Origins has a track in Smash Brothers. I think? I don't know. But I know nothing about Baten Kaitos other than that. And we have WWE Day of Reckoning. Only for the GameCube. Wow. Maybe. I mean, who knows? It might still be. It might have came to, like, PS2 later, but apparently that's only for the GameCube. Def Jam. And then Donkey Konga and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat with the DK Bongos. That is such an interesting accessory that Nintendo did, where they specifically made an accessory for one game franchise and one game franchise only, and they supported it with a lot more titles than other accessories. I'm pretty sure more games supported the DK Bongos than games supported the Wii U microphone. Which, I'm not talking about, like, the Wii U gamepad microphone, like the microphone implanted into the gamepad. No, like, there was, like, the literal microphone that you plug in with a USB cord that was labeled as the Wii U microphone. I'm pretty sure only Sing Party used that accessory, but they sold it separately, as well as with Sing Party in a bundle. So, that is one of the most worthless things Nintendo's ever released. And that was, like, basically completely branded as just Wii U. This was branded only for Donkey Kong. I don't really think Nintendo even thought about any other games other than Donkey Kong games that could use these bongos. This thing got like 4 games for it. You have Donkey Konga, and then Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. So Donkey Konga was a rhythm game by Namco, I believe. And it was pretty much how you think, you know, you have the notes come up and you smack the bongos based on the notes. And it was pretty good. I got 3 games, we didn't get the 3rd one. But, yeah, I mean, like, Donkey Kong was pretty cool, I think. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, I've only played a little bit, but it's really, really interesting. You can definitely see, like, how, you know, this was the team that went on to do Mario Galaxy afterwards, and you can see a lot of that influence, but also just the sheer quality. Like, this team was so damn good, and it kind of bums me out that it was locked behind a stupid pair of bongos. Even though it worked well with the bongos, it was just like one of those things where you kind of wish this team had like a legitimate, just were able to just make a legitimate game with a legitimate controller. Thankfully, the game came out for Wii later through the new Play Control series. You know, you still kind of have to control it a little weirdly, but you know, it's still, you know, like this is a huge quality game. NASCAR, X-Men Legends, Need for Speed Underground 2, Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, Tiger Woods, Terminator 2. One of these should be in Smash Brothers. There's Mega Man X Command Mission, which was interesting considering that we never got like X7 or X8 on GameCube. Those were only on PS2, but we got like the Mega Man X Collection, and then we got that. And I think this was, oh no, that wasn't exclusive. Huh. Never mind. NBA Live 2005, Lord of the Rings. And then, look at this. Look at this. We have the, the smaller titles here. As we can see here, Star Fox Assault was just Star Fox back then. And then, what else do we have here? SRS Street Racing Syndicate, Spyro A Hero's Tale, DreamWorks Shark Tale, FIFA 2005, NHL 2005, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Battle Nexus, Tag 2 The Staff of Dreams, The Herb Sims in the City, Catwoman, King Arthur Virtual Quest. I didn't even know that was a thing. What the hell? There's a game called Virtual Quest, like it's Virtual Fighter, but it's like an RPG, potentially. I don't know. I've never heard of Virtual Quest before. And then SpongeBob SquarePants the movie, which I'm pretty sure is using a screen cap of a Game Boy Advance video screenshot of a SpongeBob episode. The person who designed this booklet was having a field day. Next up, we have the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP specifically. Here. And this is when Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green were coming out. Pokemon keeps getting better. Yeah, it was. These were the first remakes that they did. A good choice on their end because that, obviously, these games, specifically the original Pokemon games, definitely needed a remake. And then they remade it again, or specifically Pokemon Yellow with Let's Go. Which, honestly speaking, I think is pretty smart on their end, because then now they have, like, multiple mainline ways to sell you Pokemon, where it's just like, oh, you have the mainline Pokemon games, and then you have Let's Go, as in remakes of the older games all over again, even if they've already been remade. Well, now they're remade in a simpler fashion, but then you have the regular remakes, like Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But they're just regular games, but they're remade. This one had a wireless adapter, which was kind of an interesting solution to the link cable, just giving you more of just a wireless way to do it. Final Fantasy 1 and 2, Dawn of Souls. That was published by Nintendo. That was interesting. Experienced 2 groundbreaking RPGs with updated graphics. Interesting, yeah. They definitely they were on a good track with remaking the Final Fantasies. I do know that. I do know a lot of people really liked what they did on the DS with a couple of Final Fantasy games, where they literally went in and they remade a lot of them in 3D, but they kept like what made those games so like beloved. They kept those games intact. And I think Square kind of took that similar, a similar idea with like Secret of Mana, because that got remade for the PS4, but that was stupid. Like, it looked so bad. But I felt like if that game was developed for like the original DS like 10 years ago, it would have been really cool. But instead, they waited way too long, and they put it out on the PS4 with a similar budget as to if they were developing it for the DS, if they were remaking it for the DS. And it didn't look that great. And it just kind of felt like redundant, or just like worthless. Like, why would you do that when you could just port the SNES original? Anyway, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. It's an interesting Kirby game. This was not developed by HAL. I forget who developed it, but it was not developed by HAL. This was a weird era for Kirby. Kirby didn't get a ton. They didn't have a ton going on with Kirby back then. The Kirby anime, like Kirby Right Back at Ya, was doing pretty well. I remember that was doing, everybody knew about that. But in terms of games, they had a couple of Game Boy Advance games. They had Nightmare in Dreamland, and they had this, and then they had Air Ride on the GameCube, and that was it. They really didn't have a ton of Kirby stuff going on for a couple years. Now it's literally every single year it's a new Kirby game. But back then, it was kind of the dark age of Kirby. There really wasn't a ton. Speaking of dark age, Mario Pinball Land, not a great game. I played it for I did play it. I can't. I don't want to get critical on Mario Pinball Land right now. It was just weird. It was just it just felt very monotonous, because I remember it was something where it's just you have to hit certain things. It wasn't like regular pinball games. They had to try to turn it into an adventure. A pinball adventure. I didn't like it. They turned it into a pinball adventure where it's just oh, if you miss one thing, then you have to redo all these other boards. and it was kind of lame. But then we have Donkey Kong Country 2. The Donkey Kong Country games on GBA look weird. They look like weirdly washed out, like very too bright. They're completely playable. They just look weird. You know, I don't really know if there's I think because they might have had to like redo or rescan all of the sprites and whatnot, because like obviously with Donkey Kong Country, like what they did was that they made 3D models and then they took pictures of those 3D models and then they turned those pictures into sprites, which is how, you know, they look the way they do back on the Super Nintendo. And I think they had to redo a lot of this stuff for Donkey Kong Country games on Game Boy Advance. I'm not sure specifically though. I think I heard something like that. As in, like, these ports were done by Rare, and they're a lot more. They had to do a lot more work than you may have expected, which is pretty crazy. But Donkey Kong Country 2 is definitely probably the best one. Donkey Kong Country 1 is still really good, but you know, obviously they were still learning some stuff. I feel like hit detection in Donkey Kong Country 1 is a little off. And some things are a little, like, unfair. Like, I feel like some enemy placements where, you know, enemies just kind of come out of nowhere. Like, it's just like, oh, I'm just walking along, and then, like, there's an enemy that just flies right at you from off the screen, and you couldn't see it. There's a couple of things like that in the first game, but Donkey Kong Country 2, like, by and large, like, when you play through that game, it's so good. It's so expertly crafted. I still think I prefer Retro Studios versions of Donkey Kong Country. I just think those are like perfected. Like everything about those games is like near perfection. But I think DKC 2 on SNES is the best of the original trilogy. Classic NES Series 2. So they had waves of these coming out. This was a fun little. This was a fun little way for Nintendo to make a lot of money doing nothing. This was them re-releasing old NES games as Game Boy Advance carts. And it was kind of cool because, you know, you had like this retro box art, and the Game Boy Advance cartridge itself was gray to look like the NES cartridge. And it was cool to get a lot of these games on Game Boy Advance. The problem is a lot of them just didn't make any sense to be here. Dr. Mario, I mean, like, I don't think it came out at this time, but I think at least within this year, they did Dr. Mario and Puzzle League, which was Dr. Mario plus Puzzle League on one cartridge, and you know, you had a lot more options with Dr. Mario than you do in the NES version of the game, which is just the basic NES version. That's all it is. At least Metroid, Castlevania, and Zelda 2, like, there was a lot going on with those games. You know, they're beefier titles. But even with Metroid, like, after this, they had Metroid Zero Mission, which included. Well, I mean, it was the first Metroid. You know, it was a remake. It was a better version of Metroid 1. And I believe it included the original Metroid as an unlockable. So it literally, like, well, okay. Zelda 2, I like Zelda 2. It's not that bad. In Castlevania, it was cool that they kind of got, you know, the third parties on board with this kind of stuff. But, you know, and I said Nintendo didn't do a lot, but they did some weird stuff, as you can maybe be able to tell with, like, the sprites. They are squashed down. They made these characters, they adjusted a lot of the sprites to be, like, tinier, or at least squashed down to fit well on a Game Boy Advance screen, because they didn't want to letterbox things. They didn't want to just have, like, the game, but, like, with black bars on the side. So they squashed down. You can probably be able to tell, like, Dr. Mario looks a little more, just squashed than he does in the original NES game. Samus definitely looks like that. Like, you can just compare that sprite of Samus to that sprite of Samus. That sprite of Samus definitely looks a bit shorter. So they squished some things down, and you can see, like, some things look a little stretched. Which, I mean, like, hey, They got it to work on the they got it to work on the Game Boy Advance, so you know, more power to them. And they're fine versions. They play perfectly fine, and you know, they're the original NES versions. They're just adjusted to fit on a Game Boy Advance screen. But again, the problem was like these were just the original NES games and nothing more. And they were like $20 a piece, which for some games was fine, but for others it was a bit much. Like it's just like that was you know, you could get Ice Climbers that way, or Ice Climber that way, which is just like and like you know, I kind of felt like a ripoff to get like Super Mario Brothers 1 that way, when just a generation before you got Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, which was way bigger. Like it was a way bigger game. You had so much more going on there. But then Super Mario Brothers was really re-released on the Game Boy Advance, and it was just the regular Super Mario Brothers game. And you know, for that same amount of money, at the time you could probably find Super Mario Brothers Deluxe on Game Boy Color, which would play on your Game Boy Advance for around the same amount of money. So it's just like, okay. Banjo Pilot. This was an interesting time. I might have said the word interesting a couple of times at this point, which is pretty interesting in itself. Where Rare was bought by Microsoft, and they weren't allowed to make GameCube games anymore. But since Microsoft wasn't making handheld games, they were allowed to make Game Boy Advance games, which is really weird. So that's how we got, that's why they were doing the Donkey Kong Country ports on Game Boy Advance. And we got Banjo Pilot, which I believe was supposed to be a Diddy Kong Racing successor. But obviously now that Rare was owned by a different company, they couldn't really do a ton with like, I mean, I'm pretty sure they could have, you know, they did Diddy Kong Racing DS on the DS, but it was definitely a bit easier for them to just use their own IPs, so they made it Banjo Pilot. And we also got a Banjo-Kazooie game on the Game Boy Advance, and It's Mr. Pants on the Game Boy Advance. So Rare definitely was working overtime on this platform, making games that nobody really remembers. But yeah, I mean, it was cool that you know, these franchises still at least had a place on Nintendo platforms to some extent. THQ was publishing them though, which was interesting. Obviously Microsoft at the time was more of a competitor to Nintendo. You know, they didn't really want to be buddy-buddy. So THQ kind of took the job of publishing it. That we have Minish Cap, which is a phenomenal 2D Zelda. It's not the best, but it's still really good. That was coming out in 2005, so this still had a bit to come out. But yeah, I mean, they were still pumping out good Game Boy Advance games. That was kind of like the last big, like, huge Game Boy Advance game. It's normally Zelda. Zelda's usually at the end. It's either at the beginning or the end of a console generation. And you know, it's normally not really in the middle. But Minish Cap was definitely a good way to kind of like be a solid swan song to the Game Boy Advance. It wasn't like the swan song officially, but you know, like it was kind of like the last big game for Game Boy Advance by Nintendo specifically. There's a couple more after that, but you know, that was kind of like the big, you know, exclusive Zelda game. And it was developed by Capcom. And then we have Grand Theft Auto, which I'm trying to think if this is a remake, if this is like a version of Grand Theft Auto 1, or if it's a unique top-down Grand Theft Auto. So I know Grand Theft Auto Advance was always a thing. GTA 2 was on the Game Boy Color, or a version of GTA 2. But I kind of forget if this is a remake. I think this is a remake. But it's really interesting that Grand Theft Auto was really never on Nintendo home consoles, but it was very consistently on the handhelds, which is kind of bizarre considering that the handhelds kind of were always aimed towards a younger demographic. Like you had GTA 2 on the Game Boy Color, Advance on the Advance, and Chinatown Wars on the DS. It was always a good excuse for them to go back to the top-down format, which was always cool, because like the top-down format still has its fans, and it's still like warranted because the top-down format still works. it just gave them an excuse to do that because they were like, oh, well, let's make a Grand Theft Auto game for lesser hardware. Well, the only thing we can do is the top-down stuff, but why not? We like doing the top-down stuff. We have Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. I think this has like a really impressive FMV in it. Where it's just like, oh wow, this cutscene's in a Game Boy Advance game? Get out of town. But I know nothing about it other than that. It had a card battle system. Yeah, it does. Lord of the Rings, Third Age. Finding Nemo, The Continuing Adventures. I didn't know that was a thing. I knew that some of these like kids movies had games, and then they had sequels to those games, because this was the era of licensed kids games. They were everywhere. Like The Incredibles. The Incredibles had its licensed game on, like, you know, all the platforms, and then afterwards they had a sequel to it called Rise of the Underminer. Like, these games couldn't be stopped. Dragon Ball Z, Boo's Furry, and then many more Game Boy Advance titles on the way. All right, I'll be the judge of that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Metal Slug Advance. Fairly Odd Parents Shadow Showdown. I forget if I own that one. I might have. Then Gundam Seed. Gundam Force. Disney's Aladdin, which looks like it's a version of like the SNES game. It's published by Capcom. I didn't know that was a thing. That might have not come out, because consider that's there. Then we also have Mega Man Anniversary Collection, which 100% didn't come out. That was, you had the Mega Man Anniversary Collection on GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. And they were looking to do a Game Boy Advance version, but it would be for, like, the Game Boy games. And it looks really cool, because look, it was going to be in color. It was going to be in color. Or that might have been, like, no, I think that's one of the Game Boy games. It was supposed to be, like, Mega Man 1 through 5 on the Game Boy, which would have been cool. But that got canned. But I don't recall if Disney's Aladdin, SNES Aladdin came over. I know Capcom had some of their Disney games over. I think like the Magical Quest? It's like a Mickey Mouse game on SNES. And that came over to Game Boy Advance, which is cool. I didn't know that's a thing, that Aladdin got a Game Boy Advance port. It might not have, considering, like I said, also, this never came out, and that's also by Capcom. But I want to look that up after this, because I'm actually like, wow, did that actually happen? But Zero 3, Lilo and Stitch 2, Tron 2.0, and Madden 05, The Herbs, Boktai 2, good for it, Shonen Jump's Shaman King, TMNT 2, Battle Nexus, the Spongebob Movie. I own that as a kid, and that is the correct screenshot, opposed to the GameCube screenshot. All Grown Up Express Yourself, and Power Rangers Dino Thunder. Wow, it was a big time for Game Boy Advance. Alright, well, first off, I know a problem going on here. That is not the right screenshot, because that also says All Grown Up Express Yourself. That's not All Grown Up Express Yourself. That's Nicktoons Freeze Frame Frenzy. It was like Pokemon Snap, but it was a 2D platformer instead. I own that game. It wasn't amazing, but it was a fun way to blow time on a car trip. And we have Tak 2, The Staff of Dreams on Game Boy Advance. I never played any of the Tak games, but I remember them a lot because the trailers for them were always included on the Nickelodeon games I owned as a kid. I was a big Nickelodeon kid I was a big Nickelodeon fan as a kid. That was my main channel of choice. I will always stand by the fact you can always tell who was a Cartoon Network kid growing up. They're always the weird kids with snot dripping from their nose, even today. Wwe Survivor Series. What? Oh, okay. That's interesting. Duel Masters. Digimon. F-Zero GP Legend, which I believe was based on the anime, I believe. And there was another Game Boy Advance F-Zero game after that, which never came over here. And then that was like the last F-Zero game that we got. DreamWorks Shark Tale, Ms. Pac-Man Maze Madness. That came out this late. That seems like, I believe that was like, Ms. Pac-Man Maze Madness was a Dreamcast game. And that didn't come out for the Game Boy Advance until like 2004 or later? That is crazy. Shrek 2 Beg for Mercy, again, that's what I'm talking about, because like they had the Shrek 2 Game Boy Advance game, and then they made this, which is a completely separate sequel or side game to that one. Like they had sequels to licensed kids games based on like one specific movie, so they made a sequel to the movie game that had nothing to do with the movie. Then All Grown Up Express Yourself, which is in fact Nicktoons Freeze Frame Frenzy. I know nothing about this. And then we have Game Boy Advance Video. Ooh, the lineup of videos. Don't mind if I do. Let's see. Catch full screen, full motion video on your Game Boy Advance. Watch color video with sound, no additional hardware required. Multiple episodes of your favorite shows are included on each pack. Fast forward, rewind, and change chapters using the GBA controls. Programs include Cartoon Network Collection, Nicktoons Collection, Dragon Ball GT, and Fairly Odd Parents, with dozens more on the way. Yeah. I believe, like, what? The only one that never came out was Sonic X Volume 2. I owned a couple of Game Boy Advance video cartridges as a kid. I liked them. It was really cool because, you know, pretty much all of my other family members lived like an hour away, which meant that whenever there would be like a family event sort of deal, we would have to travel like an hour at least, and my family would. So, you know, I was a big proponent of the portable DVD player club as a kid. That was used a lot. And just to have some things available on my Game Boy Advance instead was really nice. Because it was even more portable, and I could watch some stuff, and it wasn't great quality, but it was good enough. And that was like, this was back when there was also like the Video Now player, which I also had as a kid. Which again was a more portable DVD player. At the end, I would just kind of use my portable DVD player, like that was fine enough. But I still had a couple of Game Boy Advance video cartridges, and they were pretty cool back then. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see full motion video on the Game Boy Advance. And then we have some Nintendo Power advertisements and Nintendo.com. I want to see what that looks like from back in 2004. Advertising Madden 05 there. It was a big time for Madden on the GameCube. It's very interesting to see back then. And then we have this N64 era render of Mario, which seems very out of place because everything else is pretty much like, you know, the current renders at the time. No, that is like the Mario 64 render of Mario. Interesting. Oh, and then they had Nintendo Power Advance, which was like a very short-lived offshoot of Nintendo Power that specifically focused on Game Boy Advance, which made no sense because like, what else was Nintendo Power for? Not the Game Boy Advance? Like, what the hell are you talking about?